And welcome back to Zolteus Gaming Channel. I am your host, Zolteus. Back with another episode of Empire of Sin. Today, I'm sure as you noticed by the title of the video, we're going to be looking at the Henchmen. But today's episode, we're going to be looking at the first tier. So anywhere from 0 all the way up to 70 notoriety. I don't know why I keep wanting to call it prestige. But 0 to 70 notoriety. Obviously, when you first start the game, you can actually hire the first half of the first tier, but do you want to? I guess that's the question, right? 70 notoriety to start might not be too difficult. So I am going to rate the first tier based on their profession and based on whether or not I would hire them to start or all the way up to 70 and who would compose my team if I were only working with tier 1. First off, we have Gibby. Alright, so here's the thing about Gibby. He's the only demolitionist in tier 1 and you can get him right off the bat. So if your build is going to be based around explosives, he's definitely a get. However, here's the thing with Gibby. It's great that he's immovable. It's great that he has a decent initiative. Hair trigger is good. It's probably in this case the only truly good thing that I can say about him is that he has a hair trigger. So when he's using this submachine gun, this Tommy gun, he can activate hair trigger. Most of the time they're going to use the handgun for that, but they can activate hair trigger for this, which, as you can see, 25% chance to activate when either that character or any other character that's an ally drops to below 25% chance. 25% chance. So it's still a 1 in 4 if someone drops to below 25% health. Still decent. And immovable's great, so he's not going to get knocked back. However, your demolitionists really should not be like frontline characters, in my opinion. Some of them may have to be, but the whole point of demolitions is you're throwing something so you're not caught in the blast, right? So, not that great on that end. Same with Giant. It's great that he gets a plus to melee. He shouldn't be in melee. And he gets a -5 defense bonus. And that's, already based on the fact that he gets a -10 from Giant and Reckless total. But the only reason he has any defense is because he is in love with someone else, right? If this person goes away for some reason, or if she dies, this goes down to +0 in love, and then you have a -10 defense. So, not necessarily great. That's great. Reckless, in combination with Giant, makes him more vulnerable. So, as far as starting, probably not. I wouldn't start with this particular demolitionist. Figure out what your approach to the game is going to be, and then figure out, do you need to stack demolitionists, and if for some reason you do, this would still be my last choice, just based on the fact that he has okay defense. His movement's not that great, his initiative is pretty low, and he's mid-tier when it comes to marksman and melee and leadership and persuasion, with pretty much all stats. Decent hit points, but my opinion is no. I would not hire Gibby Willard. Next, we're gonna talk about. Let's see. No, we'll go with Guido. So,
right. How are you?
Guido Cervone. He's a con artist, and just like Gibby, he's the only con artist in this tier. He does require 15, so you can't hire him right off the bat. It won't take long. But here's the thing about Guido. He has great marksman. He's good marksman. He's thick-skinned, which means less injury, more chance to resist crit. And he's mid-tier melee, so he's okay. As you remember, if you watched my previous video, con artists they can do range, but they tend to work up close. So he's mid-tier melee. He's okay. His the things that I have an issue with is his initiative's pretty low. His movement is okay, and he has absolutely zero bonus to defense. He also has the worst hit points out of everyone in Tier 1. I think the next lowest is 63, and quite a few have that, but he has the fewest. Additionally, he also has Afraid, which means he has a chance to flee from combat if someone dies. And he has Coward, which is a 25% chance to run away if a team member runs away. So, some things to look out for there. It's definitely, let's just say, con artists are definitely a play style. If you're going to use con artists, it's a play style. Personally, Tier 1, based on all of the negatives surrounding Guido, I would absolutely not start with Guido. Now we're going to talk about Nora Quinn. So Nora Quinn's a doctor. And just like Gibby and just like Guido, she is the only doctor in this tier. Difference is you can start with her if you wish. All right, so the good things about Nora, got good amount of hit points. Good amount. Another thing for her is, high defense bonus to start, but once again, this is conditional, right? And a pretty decent marksman. I know there's a -5 in Sullen, and you have Sullen right here. However, it's duration 90 rounds, so it's gonna go away eventually. It may take a little while, but it will go away. Now the things, mid-tier in melee, intimidation, persuasion, or leadership. She's very low on persuasion. She's also kind of mid-tier in movement, which isn't that great. And the big one is she's afraid, so she'll flee if someone dies. So you kind of always need to start with you don't need to start with a doctor, but you will eventually need one. If you followed any of my previous videos, I showed you how to get a Tier 5 doctor, weirdly enough. Not too long into the game, it's a series of it's a quest chain, but it's a series of quests, so you can get one that is a top tier doctor. But if you can't wait that long, decent hit points, mid-tier initiative and movement, but decent amount of defense, so she will definitely fit the bill. So if I needed a doctor and I was only in the first tier, I would definitely get her. All right, so in this tier, we also have enforcers. There are 4 total enforcers, so we're gonna go across the line. We're gonna start with Hugh.
Hey there.
All right, so the good things about Hugh: he is okay at marksman. I mean, not great at melee, but it's still pretty close to 60. So we're talking okay marksman, okay melee. He also has immovable, which is what you kind of want in an enforcer, or if you want to call him a tank. You don't want him to be, knocked back. You want him normally to stay where he's at because he is most likely a buffer zone for something. And he's brave. He gets +20 initiative when outnumbered. So that brings that kind of mid-tier initiative up a little bit when outnumbered, so that's good. His hit points, he's kind of mid-tier hit points and mid-tier movement for a tank anyway. As a matter of fact, if I remember, and we'll look at all of them, 84 is one of the lowest hit points for tanks. So he's on that low end. Plus, he has absolutely 0 defense to start. So unless you give him armor, like you would want to with all, but I mean, he's going to start with 0 armor. He also he does get a bonus to defense when you put armor on him, so that is good. But he still starts with 0, which kind of gives him that kind of gives him a negative to start. Hugh, he is the only one you can hire at 0. The rest of them have a notoriety requirement. So if you need one to start, I mean, he's your only option. To be honest, out of the 4 that you can get in Tier 1, he is probably on the low end, if not the lowest. But let's take a look at the other. So the next one you can get is Tommy Biscuits, and he requires 30.
Hello.
So here's the good stuff about Tommy. He's got an okay marksman. He has good defense because he has, that in love status. He doesn't get a bonus to it, but he starts with 25, which already puts him, above Hugh. And he's got hair trigger, which in this case, hair trigger is 100% chance to activate. And that's nice. And we've already kind of talked about hair trigger. So it doesn't matter. Anytime anyone's hit points drop below 25, he'll pull out his trusty revolver and shoot 1, possibly 2 people. So, that's good for Tommy. Kind of the bad things for Tommy, he is also at the 84 hit point scale, so he is lower. And like I said, his melee is I think his melee is the lowest out of all of them. So, and he has the lowest movement. That's kind of bad for someone who is supposed to be melee range, right? So he's not going to go very far. He's going to have the low melee, and his initiative is meh. So I would say I would still take Hugh over him if I were given an option just between the two. Next, we have Clyde 2-Ton Malone. All right, so I've got a lot of pluses about Clyde here. So he has a highest hit points out of all of the tier 1s. He has a great melee. I think it's the highest, but he may be second highest. But either way, it's pretty freaking close. And he has the highest marksman. High melee, high marksman, high hit points. He has the highest movement. He has a decent defense. And his leadership ability is insane. That 87 on a tier 1, if you've played the game, you know that eventually you're going to need to fill a slot with leadership. That is a high leadership, and unless you have someone else recruited that has a higher, at the beginning, probably not. That's just insane. His I guess we can call them cons. Kind of a lower initiative. Giant works both ways. It's good and bad for him. It gives him that plus to melee, but it also gives him that minus 5 to defense bonus. So he has a defense bonus, which is good, but he also has that minus 5 from Giant. Really, other than that, and he's aggressive, which means he gains morale when involved in combat. And now you see that butt lose 2 morale after going 1 week without combat. In any decent game, you're probably going to have at least 1 combat per week, if not more than that. So there's pros and cons to aggressive, but the pros probably outweigh the cons. So in this case, just based on these stats, based on those hit points, he is probably my number 1. But when we talk about the next one, you guys may disagree. Just my personal opinion. So now we're going to talk about Patrick Grady. So here's Patrick. He's got pretty decent hit points, right? Not as high, but he's got that really high melee. He's got a pretty dang good marksman. He's got a better marksman than some of the hired guns. He's got a really good base initiative. That is really good. He also has aggressive. The other thing that he has is thick-skinned, and possibly what might put him over Clyde is the fact that he has a cat has 9 lives. So this ability, once per combat, attack would kill him. They instead bounce back with 20% hit points. That's insane. Like that's like a come back from the dead kind of thing. So pure stats, Clyde wins. However, in functionality, Patrick may take it on this one. One thing you do realize between the two of them, he only requires 45 notoriety, whereas Patrick requires 70. So might be a little bit longer before you can get him, but if I had to rate them based on stats, it would go Clyde, Pat, Tommy, then Hugh. If I had to rate them by usability, it would go Pat, Clyde, Hugh, Tommy. So those are your enforcers. Now, of course, the meat and potatoes of your damage dealing. We're going to talk about hired guns. So I'm also going to talk about them in stats and usability. But to start, we have Maria. Maria, she has the bonus of hair trigger, and that's also at 100%, which is good. We've talked about hair trigger. Here's the thing that really stands her out to me is shoot first. So this person will immediately go into Overwatch at the start of combat. So when you start combat and everyone starts moving around, well, that's Overwatch, right? As soon as someone walks within your line of sight, you shoot at them, right? And of course, it's aimed in a certain way, but still, you'll shoot at them. So to begin every single combat, if she has a really good gun, she will shoot first and ask questions later. And I tell you what, to have this and maybe even a boss that has shoot first, because there are some, that would put these two just in a category in and of themselves. At the beginning of every combat, if you dropped into combat or if you could run up to them before combat would start and then hit the control button for combat and start, that's automatic shots. And if they have good weapons, you could potentially down people. So this to me is a big deal. And she's about mid-tier movement, which, yes, you want that out of your hired guns, but they're also supposed to be ranged, so not a big deal there. And mid-tier defense, in love, but she's angry, and I'll talk about angry in just a second. So, low initiative. She has, I believe, the second lowest initiative, and when you're talking about people who are going to be doing a majority of your damage, you want them to kind of go first. So, bad there. Lowest marksman, as a matter of fact, I'm almost positive, even if you take, because this gives you a minus 20 to marksman, even if you take that off, that's 66, that is the lowest marksman because of angry and burst fire. You take burst fire off there, you're still at 66, which is one of the lowest. She has great melee, but once again, you're not that. I would never recommend using hired guns for melee. So lowest marksman, and then of course you have angry, which gives you a minus to marksman, like we had talked about before, and gives you a minus 10 defense bonus. So not that great. So stats-wise, she's not the worst, but she is by far not the best. But this ability right here, shoot first, makes her my number one for usability, 100%. Yes, all of the other ones are going to have better marksmen, so on and so forth, but I mean, this is insane. And you can give her a better, weapon that takes some of that, marksman away. But yeah, I mean, you have no idea how many battles have just resolved before it even started just because of Overwatch. Shoot first. So, personal opinion, but I rate her on usability much higher. Her stats, not so much. All right, next we're going to talk about Earl Weiss. So, some of the pluses on Earl. Decent marksman. He starts 5 above. I'm blanking. Maria, sorry. But he also has burst fire. So, if you were to take this off, this would already be 84. So, very high, right? He also is small. He loses 30% melee, however, he gains a plus 10 defense bonus. So he's not in love, so he doesn't have that, but he still has a 10 defense, which is pretty decent. He also, unlike Maria, has some of the more decent hit points for hired gun, at least for tier 1. So he's got that going for him. The only sucky part for him is, like Maria, he has a pretty low initiative. He has plus 10% from one of his traits, but it's still on the low end. However, he does have a pretty good movement. That's pretty much it for Earl. Usability, just he's gonna be one of the lower marksmen. and he has pretty low initiative, so usability is the least. I put him at 5. However, his stats, overall stats, and his hit points, movement, defense, that puts him actually at the top of the bunch, and you'll see in just a second why that is. All right, next we are going to talk about Grover Monks. So, Grover, he has very mid-tier, or he has decent initiative, mid-tier movement, but decent initiative. He has a decent defense, even with the condition of in love. He still has a decent defense. He has a pretty dang good marksman. I mean, it's not the best out of all of them, but that's high. And so that's good for him. However, the rest of his stats kind of leave something to be desired. He has the lower of the hit points. However, one of the things that we will talk about is reckless, plus 2 initiative. Yeah, he gets that -5 to defense, which isn't great, but you want the higher initiative. You also have calm, which is less chance to bleed out, less chance to die and just bleed out instead. Which, if you've seen my previous videos, that's an ability that you can actually train. Whereas in this case, he has a 1 in 4 chance of bleeding out instead of dying anyway, so that's good. Thick-skinned, so that's nice. Resist that crit, which you want to keep your DPS, or your damage dealers up longer, as long as you can. Kind of already talked about the negatives. Really low movement, the lower hit points, so not super great, but I would say usability, just from some of these abilities down here, and the fact that he has a really good just from his abilities down here in his defense, I would give him a usability of number 2, so just below Maria. And he's mid-tier. He's number 3 out of 5 for stats. He's got okay stats, but that marksman and that initiative really put him a little bit higher than some of the others. So, talked about him. Now it's time to talk about Cyril McRae. So, once again, also an 81 marksman, but better melee. The problem here isn't in his abilities, but it's his stats. But he also has hair trigger, and he has thick skin, so that's great. His problem is lowest initiative and just like I want to say it was Grover, low movement. So not only will he start pretty much last, he's not going very far, and he has the lowest hit points out of all of them, just like Maria. So we've got, on here, usability, I have him as number 3, but stats, I have him as the absolute worst. His marksman almost brought him up from the worst, but, none of these leave anything to be desired. He has the absolute worst movement, the absolute worst initiative, and he has the worst hit points. So kind of brings him out of the running. And last but not least, we have Claude Bernard. All right, so Claude here. His bonuses, or his pluses, he has the highest marksman. He has the highest movement, and he ties for highest hit points. I mean, decent melee and decent leadership, so he does fairly well on stats. However, he also has happy, which gives him a plus to marksman, but it also gives a morale bonus to nearby party members. And as you know, when people are figuring out whether or not they want to run away, it's based on morale. Just being around him gives him a plus, 5% morale bonus. That's great. He is also thick-skinned. So, that chance to resist that crit, that's good. His cons, low initiative. That's out of everything, that's pretty much the only real bad thing for him. Now, once again, he doesn't have a submachine gun, so this would have been a 68 if he had that. But this still puts him at the highest because of happy. So he has the highest marksman, he has the highest amount of hit points, and he has the best movement. Not the greatest initiative, but decent leadership. That's why I put him at stats number 2 and usability 4. That initiative means a lot. Marksman means a lot, and initiative means a lot. And he has great marksman, but he's just not going to start first, which means, you have a bunch of people that can start early. You might be able to down 1 or 2 before true combat actually starts, and that kind of brings that down. But if I were to actually rate them, for me personally, I go with Maria first just because of shoot first. I do like Claude because of his marksman and because of his stats. However, I'm just going to rate him number 3 just because of his initiative. I would rate Grover number 2 mostly because he has decent marksman, he has decent initiative, he has several abilities that put him above others. The only really big drawback is his low movement. I can work with that. So it would go Maria, Grover. I would probably go Maria. I would go Grover. I would go Claude, Earl, and then Cyril. Cyril with the lowest initiative and movement, just that does it for me. So I would go Maria, I would go Grover, I would go Claude, then I would go Earl, and then last, it's not going to be Tommy, it's going to be Cyril. So that's how I would rate those. Now, as far as these, obviously I would hire Maria 100% to start. I wouldn't hire Gibby. He just has too many downsides. Hugh, if I can put it off, I would put off hiring him. Earl, like I said, he's on my lower end, so probably not. I would probably hire Grover at least to start. Until you can get some higher tier folks. And if I can avoid it, I wouldn't hire Nora just because you could get Diana Madura later. Or not later, but if you do a quest chain, you can get her in, top tier. We're talking 110 hit points, 85, 77 leadership, amazing initiative, really good movement, has defense. I mean, but she's in the 5th tier for a reason. So I would probably avoid. Once I hit 15, I would probably not hire Guido. He's on the low end of the con artists. And getting 15, sorry, not initiative, but getting 15 notoriety would not be difficult. Tommy, probably not, only because I would hold out for Clyde. And if I wanted a second enforcer, I would get Patrick. Cyril, absolutely not. He's the worst rated of the hired guns in this range. But I would strongly consider Claude if for some reason I didn't have Grover. If I did have Grover, I probably wouldn't hire Clyde just because I would have 2 hired guns already. I'd be looking at hiring an enforcer, and then very soon after that, maybe if I wanted another, I would have a doctor. So that's kind of how I would start the first tier, and that's how I rate them. I'm not going to rate them 1 through 10, but, I mean, you can tell based on their abilities who's good and who's bad. So, that's going to do it for the Tier 1 Henchmen. Like and subscribe for more content. And as always, I will see you in the next video.